without further ado, episode 15 of The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One. I don't know the title. Do you happen to
Yeah,
know?
actually it's like hang on to your hats or something. I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Um let's see.
Hang on tight or hold on tight, maybe?
Yeah, hold on tight, I think. Yeah,
Something
I'll
to
say it
that
by the
effect.
end. I'll say
Yeah.
it by the end.
But so we pick up, and just to give you guys a brief reminder of where we left off, Ame was essentially in a coma, and the crew was headed to the Citadel. So with episode 15, we pick up with Brennan saying, "It's autumn. It's quiet." And Ame, you're sitting by a tiny dock, by the small like pool of or not pool of water, but a small body of water. And we quickly realize that it's a flashback. And we hear grandmother Rin call Ame for help. So she runs back, and as she's kind of like in this flashback, this memory, she hears another voice that's not grandmother Rin, a voice she doesn't recognize that says like very good, like we're seeing promising signs. And it's now that Ame realizes that she is indeed like in a memory. She's kind of like witnessing an old memory of hers. And as she realizes that, it all kind of goes black and she slips back into like darkness. Um, she then is described like searching through this darkness for specific memories, for a summer after her friends left. It then picks back up with a young Ame, about 9 years old, bursting into the kitchen, and the summer festival is coming. But something's wrong. Grandmother Wren tells her to take a lantern and go stand out by the road. So she does that, and her lantern starts to go out after a while. And then suddenly there is a figure like looming behind her, standing over her in the road. A woman that is exceptionally tall, as Brennan describes, wearing a dark black gown with a headdress or crown, maybe of dark spines, shadowy black, and a white porcelain mask. And this woman says, "Do you offer me something?" And Ame tries to deflect, and the woman again says, "I asked you a question." Ame then hears grandmother Ren's voice in her head, and Ren says, "You offer her a compliment," to which Ame then does. The woman says she's called Mirara, and she says, "You've come to light my way from the road to the door of Ren's abode." So she does just that, and once they all get inside, Ren says, "Ame, very good. Now, go make us some tea. I need to talk with my sister." Ame freaks out. She's like, "You have a sister?" But we quickly learn that it's sisters of a coven. Marara says that it's not a kindness that she came to meet, it was an obligation. Ame makes tea, Marara grabs it, and Brenner describes like this hand coming out of the chest of this woman and then grabbing the tea and like disappearing back into the darkness. She says, "Time does not appear to be on our side, Ren. A decision must be made." Ren says, "I think you know where I stand." And Marara says, "If these tidings cannot sway you, what possibly could?" And Ren says, "Maybe nothing could sway me." So Marara looks at Ame and says, Ren, your apprentice here offered me her hand." Ren says, "It was a gesture of friendship." And Marara says, "Or it was a hand." She says, "If I'm forced by circumstance to act to see my obligations fulfilled, then I will do it. These are desperate times. And if I'm offered something as special as the hand of a great witch's apprentice, how could I not?" And Rin kind of like cuts her off and says, "Marara, I've never known you to refrain from a fight you thought you could win." Um, Ame kind of laughs at this little jab, and Rin's like, "Hey, you get out of the kitchen, go
Yeah.
away."
Don't you
Um,
dare.
yeah. And Rin's like, "I, on the other hand, refrain from fights I can win all the time." And actually, there's a little moment when Ame is like leaving the kitchen. She can't help but like look back at Marara, and Brennan has her roll a wisdom save, but she rolls an 18, so she is presumably successful. Um, but as Marara, or as Ame is leaving, Marara says, "There's much the coven can do without full agreement." Meaning, like, even if Ren doesn't agree, like, they can still take action. And Ren's like, "You can do as you must, but it will not be with full unanimity." I think, hopefully, I'm saying that right. Um, Ren and Ame then they sit down and have a conversation after Marara leaves, and Ren's like, "Ame, one day you will have a coven of your own as well. Marara is one of mine, one of four." And for fate or for fortune, the coven you will inherit from me one day will be the coven of elders. You will be the witch of the world's heart. She then grabs something, I think it's like a book or a tome or some sort of like small case with a poem written on it that says, "Of open hand and trusting face, a home of homes does all embrace." She goes on to say, "There have been many witches, and of these witches, um, there have each been of many people. I am not the first, excuse me, there have been many witches, and each like station of which many people have filled. I am not the first witch of the world's heart, but for the past 172 years, it's been me. The area of witches' care are in some ways her domain. A witch does not have authority, she has responsibility. You're responsible for what you represent. Of the Elder Coven, there are five, and she's sad when she says this because Ren says when she was young and first became the Witch of the World's Heart, there were seven in her coven, and there have been as many as 13. Marara is one of them, the Witch of the Waning Moon. There is also Grimoire, the Witch of the Wild Hunt, Hakea, the Witch of the Woodland Green, and Indri, the Witch of the Wind and Stars. Ame asks about the witches that were lost. Did they not have apprentices to take over for them? They did not. One of them never took an apprentice, and the other's apprentice betrayed them. Aruna, the Witch of the Wild Blue Sea, and Scalvi, the Witch of the Watching Fire, both departed their seats unsucceeded. Marara does not have an apprentice. Um, and Rin just keeps telling her all this stuff and basically is saying, like, there's so much in the world you have to understand. There's value in the truths we are all able to speak to. And although I don't like Marara's truths and she doesn't like mine, they're there and they're both true. And Ame's like, how can there be more than one truth? And she says, the world contains multitudes. As a good witch, hopefully there are enough good things that are true so that your magic might flourish. And Ame's like, well, how do I know if I'm doing the right thing? And Ren's like, good question. Let's spend the rest of our lives trying to figure that out. They continue with Ren basically saying, you know, you're coming in at the end of my story, and whatever wisdom you think I have, I can assure you it filled with mistakes that taught me that wisdom. And over the coming days and months, as Ame trains to become the Witch of the World's Heart, um, Rin continues to like fill her in on things and teach her about the world and teach her spells and lessons. And she says the world's heart is not a physical thing, but instead it is the tapestry in which all the parts of the world move together. And that her domain and a domain in general is a fluid thing, hard to define, but it's compassion, understanding, thoughtfulness, growth, to have two things join and become more than the sum of their parts. This is kind of the concept of the world's heart. There's then this awesome segment during this training where Ame takes her first broom ride with Grandmother Rin, and many of their adventures around this time in her life is about Rin's friends growing old, dying, transitioning of power. And she tells Ame, like, this is going to be a very dangerous time for the world when I pass on and you take over, because you're not going to have the same experience that I have in order to, you know, protect the world's heart. So you need to be very careful. We then learn a bit more about the witches in the coven. So we have the Witch of the Wild Hunt, who is a monstrous witch, and each witch has a little poem. And hers is, where beasts have tread and monsters fed, the bloody fanged maw has led. The Witch of the Wind and Stars lives in the far northernmost part of the world, of frost and stone, of ice and throne, the ruler of the self alone. The Witch of the Woodland Green, the holly branch and towering oak, the lemon leaf and thorn her folk. The Witch of the Waning Moon, which this is Marara, the death of light, the end of night, the all-consuming, or excuse me, the death of light, the end of might, the all-consuming dread of night. The Witch of the World's Heart, of open hand and trusting face, a home of homes does all embrace. And Ame realizes that of all of these stations of the coven, only one concerns itself with people, hers, Rin's. All the purview of all of humanity, all of people, is decided by a single seat on the coven. So there is much in the world that is spoken for outside of people. Um, we continue going through over the years of memories. And Ame thinks back on her most sorrowful memory. And that's when she goes into town when she's maybe 14, and basically some other kids bully her as she's trying to figure out maybe who her parents are. And they're like, "You just showed up one day. Like I heard you were born out of an egg." And she gets into a small fight. Rin scolds her back at home. They get into it, have a pretty good argument. And Ame is like, I could have like made them act how I wanted to with my magic. And Rin is like, it terrifies me that you say that. Like, what you're referring to has the power to rot you from within and turn you into something you wouldn't recognize. Like, do not glibly invoke casting magic to hurt people. Ame's really upset. She just wants to be normal. And Rin is just considering the extremely dangerous statement her apprentice just made, but walks over and hugs her. And she says, "You miss them, don't you?" Referring to Ursulan and Suvi. She's like, "Yeah, to them, I was Ame. To everyone else, I'm just a witch. I can't be like them. I don't belong with the spirits. Like, I don't have anybody, just you." She apologizes for, acting out. Um, it's at this point that Rin pulls out this toy that Suvi's parents gave her for Suvi that she still has. And it's like a little bouncy ball. And she tells her this lesson of how, it can never go higher than the point from which it was dropped. So, similarly, like feelings of great pain and loss come from great joy. It's a reflection of the friendship that you lost that summer that you feel so sad and lonely now. Um, she's like, I can't promise that it won't always be lonely. I don't have all the answers, but the world will always be ready to see you as a witch. Sometimes in wonder, sometimes in fear. Um, but she says, I do see you and Suvi possibly meeting again. I talk to Steele about her all the time to make sure she's safe. And she's like, I guess you're old enough now for me to tell you more about what was going on. And she tells her about how Suvi's parents and Steele were all involved in this investigation because there was this like corrupt sect within the Citadel that was secretly working to bring it down. And she's telling Ame this because, you're going to soon take my place, and this information is very dangerous and could get you killed. Um, so this group was called the Akata, which is this small group of individuals within the leadership of the Citadel that included Subi's parents and Steele, and several figures outside of the Citadel. And they were alerted to this rogue faction within the Citadel. And one of these people that was working with Suvi's parents was Yorin, like we've heard. Um, and they called this rogue sect the League of Whispers. So the Akata was operating outside the normal bands of authority because they didn't know who they could trust. And there was this like prolonged series of like secret missions and violence across Umora. And ultimately, it was believed that the League of Whispers had kind of had to disperse underground, um, in like the current time. So they haven't heard much about it, but Rin often asks Steele if there's any update, and Steele often asks Rin if she's heard anything about Yorin. So it kind of feels like Yorin perhaps was the one that betrayed Suvi's parents. Memories continue to flood back. Rin tells Ame about all of her friends across the world. Mechanically speaking, just as the group is traveling along, Ame might be able to say, like, "Hey, do I happen to know anybody here?" Brennan just says, like, he gives her all that information. Specifically, though, he tells her about a couple alliances at the Citadel, a couple of wizards and a spirit that she could call on, and a powerful immortal warlock in the port of Kudroy on the inner sea of Ruve. There's a man named Thrawn. He sold his soul to the moon for immortality, and in exchange, he made a promise to always look after his descendants if asked. Since he's so old, he now has like thousands of descendants, and Ame is one of them. The last memory that comes back to her is the day before Rin became bedridden. She tells her there's a spirit moving upon the world in a way she's never seen before. He has held his breath since the beginning of time. The pilgrim under the stars, the man in black, the king in night, the stranger. He's been moving upon the world in a way that she cannot see since she was a young girl. She's never found a scrap of what his name might be, which means she doesn't think he's ever been bound. She says that earlier this month she was in a place called the Coven of Elders, or she was in a sacred place of the Coven of Elders called the Grove of the Well, and the stranger appeared and attacked her there, and she fears he's coming to the cottage. Um, If he comes, she says, do not grant him entry. It is important that you do not lose this home. There is power and station here. There will come a very brief moment when I am gone that there will be no witch of the world's heart, and he will strike. She will tell her, Rin will tell Ame everything else she needs to know to prepare. And it's at this point that Ame wakes up and she realizes she's in the Citadel and the fox is with her. He immediately licks her all over and then essentially immediately passes out. She then soon encounters a Dr. Nadine Tamri who walks in the room and is like, "You're awake." And she says, "That fox has been awake the entire time you've been into a coma for the past month." And that's where the episode breaks.
Yeah.
And apologies for how long-winded that was, but there was so much.
You hit every detail. No, I'm just kidding. No, yeah. Sorry, I had to step away for a second because my son's, I guess the door got shut on his foot or something. So I was like, maybe I should take a look at this. But no, yeah. Very meaty, lots of really cool information in that first like 2/3. Wrapping up some details before the episode ends. We'll mention the fox already. The fox finally is like, now that his watch has ended, finally passes out on the bed. There is a caretaker, which I think you just mentioned. And the scene actually transitions over to Suvi and a bundle of blankets in her bed on this cozy morning. And in her bed is Silver, the wizard that that she had an eye on back in the very first episode of the series. And I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but it's been about a month. And what's important for Suvi around this time is that it is coming up to her ceremony of receiving her name cloak. And we come to find out that this is a process in which there's a lot of power in someone's name. And it is where a wizard dons a new name for themselves. We find out that her parents, Soft and Stone, that was their name cloak names, not their real names. And Silver essentially asks, Suvi what name she has chosen. And Suvi says that she has chosen the name Sky to be her new name, so to speak. It's also around this time that Silver's leaving through a dimension door to go back to his abode when she gets the heads up that her friend Ame has awoken. So we get this. I love how Aabria describes it as like a rom-com scene of like running through like the city marketplace, and it's very much that she rushes out to get to where Ame is resting. Essentially, runs into Ursulon, who Brennan lets us know that the town now calls him, or they've continued to use the name Bear to refer to him. And they also pass through, I can't remember the name for it, but it's basically like the nicest part of the marketplace or the nicest part of the town. They eventually make their way to Ame's room. There are hugs and re-embracing of one another, but it is short-lived because Steel shows up. And there's this immediate sort of like tension of what to tell Steel or what to say to Steel. Regardless, Steel basically comes in the room and Ame essentially tells her, "Hey, all of my memories are back." To which Steel says, "Well, that's good to know. Maybe you should only share that with me in like a very private setting that we have control over." Basically saying like, hey, be extremely careful what you share and to who you share it to. And that is essentially where the episode ends. Episode 15, Hang On Tight, of Worlds Beyond number. I always want to say The Lion, the Witch, in the Wardrobe.
Yeah, me too.
But The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One. So anyway.
Yep. Part 1 of chapter 2. And again, if you're just on the recap and want to see our full discussion, it'll be linked down below.